Is there much of an argument to be made to like be thinning out your digital records if you're using an EMR system and you've had patients on there for 20 years?
You know what, that there's less of an argument because the footprint is much smaller. And as what we see as common is, a physician who's transitioned, especially in Ontario, the transition is happening. It's been happening quite frequently over the last several years. You'll see the EMR only has 5 years of information in the sense that it's indexed, it's inputted, and it's all up to date. But then it'll have 20 years of information that's just an attached PDF. So the PDF is just there for reference, but you really only have a 5-year chart in essence. So it's one of those things where the physician, they find it's twofold, where they can get rid of the physical footprint of the chart, but they now feel better that they can keep the whole chart attached to the patient history. So it's a bit of a compromise as physicians are transitioning. But like I said, in terms of the capacity and footprint, there's no real need to trim digital charts unless there's just a preference of the physician. But at that point, there's not as much of a need.
And then back to the requirements, the obligations side of things. So we talked a little bit about just the time period that you have to keep these charts around for. What other obligations are you beholden to in terms of like patient trying to access it, or if the police trying to access it, or an insurance company, or the WCB occupation? What's the actual rules around that?
Yeah, so it's a good question because one of the conversations I'll have with physicians, at times they'll present an idea to me on how they're going to manage their own records in their retirement, and so we go through a bit of a an example of what they might encounter in 3 months, in 1 year, 3 years, so on and so forth, and whether or not the physician is equipped to respond to those requests. So it's one thing for them to think, okay, I'm retiring, I'm closing my practice, I'm just going to, let's say it's an EMR, I'm just going to create a digital backup of all my records so that I can transfer them. So, then you have to start asking all the questions of, are you storing these files in a, secure, compliant platform, either online or offline, depending on what you're using? Do you have appropriate backups? Do you have a file transfer system that you can send encrypted files securely to patients when they request it? If a patient, if they want to call you, what number are they calling? Are they calling your home phone at 10 p.m. at night? Because we get calls 24/7, with different time zones, different requirements. So we're always getting calls, day and night. And then if you do get a request, if you're on vacation, let's say you're fortunate enough to be retired and vacationing somewhere overseas, you have a requirement to respond in a certain amount of time. So it's one of those things where you always have to be accessible. You always have to be able to respond within 30 days or less and provide a copy, or at least provide support for why a copy hasn't been produced yet. So there's all these considerations, and that's just for the digital storage, right? That's what I would call the easier side of things. If you're a physician with physical charts, there's a whole other slew of considerations with, where are you storing that? Is it in a climate controlled area where, if you put it in your basement, which we've seen before, what happens if there's a flood and your records are, flooded, or a house fire? There's all these things that you're liable for as a physician that you need to consider. And then same thing, if you get a request and that means you now have to convert that chart into a digital chart. So do you have, a high quality scanner that can reproduce that chart in a manner that's acceptable from a quality perspective, right? So there's all of these considerations that they don't necessarily put a lot of thought into up front. So we have the conversation with them and we say, these are all the things that you will be required to do if you want to do this yourself. And are you, so as you go into retirement, is this what you want to be worried about in your retirement? Do you want to enjoy and have the peace of mind that everything's being handled? Or do you want to be on call again in your retirement at, a moment's notice? So it's again, it's every physician's individual choice, but once you lay it out and you kind of describe the the scenarios that may arise, it becomes a much better case for them to use a custodian instead of trying to do it themselves.
I'm Dr. Jordan Vollrath, and you've been watching Cherry Live, brought to you by Cherry Health. Please like and subscribe to see more clips like this, or check us out at www.cherry.health, Canada's medical network.